JKB back with another episode. Today on the show I'm reviewing the Falconeer. Thank you so much to the dev for the review copy. According to the official outline of the game, the Falconeer is an open world air combat game featuring fast, brutal aerial dogfights and deep exploration of incredible fantasy open world settings, not only above the clouds but also amongst the waves. And for the most part, I kind of agree with that statement. However, this game is flawed. As for the story, of course, I will not spoil anything and will say the Falconeer is a story that kind of reminded me of Waterworld, and I don't know if that's a great thing because that movie, well, we all know how that went. But the story in here is about different factions that are battling it out over the open water to gain control of this world. So overall, in terms of a story, it's very bare bones, and don't go into this expecting anything really deep. Visually, the game is stunning, from thunderstorms rolling in during missions crashing upon your Falconeer, or the waves below you glistening in the sunlight. There's something magical about the art design in this game, and that is definitely one of the high points. There's actually something really important I want to bring up. This game is made by one person, essentially. Yes, there were a few more people in terms of sound design and the music that you hear in the game, but the rest of the game was designed by one person, so it kind of puts it into perspective in terms of what's went into the game and what you get out of it. The fact that it was one person is actually astonishing. One thing I do have to bring up about the way the game is set up, it is kind of an open world because you have chapters and you're able to select any chapter to start in. However, they're all split up and you're thinking, well, is this chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3? It's very confusing, but you can go anywhere you want, so I don't know why they're called chapters. So right off the bat, I was a little confused in terms of the story because, you know, you can jump into the 4th chapter if you feel like. As for the missions themselves, it's very hard to kind of distinguish different zones in this game because it is the open ocean. You do see different sort of towns below you, and you see different boats and creatures coming out of the water. But again, the game does feel very similar, and you're spending a lot of time simply flying and not doing much, just looking at the ocean below you, storms rolling in, maybe a boat will go by or a creature jumps out of the ocean below you, but there's a lot of just sitting there and waiting, and that's kind of disappointing. I was hoping for a little bit more action, but when the action does start to kind of approach in the distance, the music and the graphics suddenly kick into high gear because a storm will roll in or a sunset is in the background and you go, oh my god, wait a minute, what's going on here? And you'll hear your co-pilot, who's flying next to you on his own sort of Warbird, next to you. He's able to do anything you want him to do. You can actually send him to targets, but the moment of battle is pretty exciting. Now let me break down the combat. You've got a simple weapon, and then you have the ability to shoot sort of, I would say, missiles at enemies when they're locked on. You do get a sense that this is sort of a spiritual successor to Crimson Skies, which was on the original Xbox. I believe it might have been a launch title for Xbox Live, and I was a huge fan of that. So getting that gameplay in a game like this is great, but it's still sort of lacking. While the combat is a lot of fun at times, I do feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over. And yes, at the beginning of the game, you can choose different birds which have different abilities, of course, so you can get a little bit of a different feel out of the different types of birds. However, you're just doing the same thing, shooting. So yes, it's amazing, but you have to be a huge fan of this to really get into it. So if you're a fan of Crimson Skies for the original Xbox, you'll be in love with this game because it, again, feels like a spiritual successor. And I'm not knocking the game just because it kind of does one thing. When you think about it, a lot of different things are coming together here to create the overall experience, such as the graphics, the music, and the gameplay. And when it comes all together, it's a pretty good game. But sadly, the moments of the game coming together to create those special moments with everything just working are very few and far between. So overall, I'm going to give the game a 6.5 out of 10. I think that they missed the mark on the release of this game. It was amazing to see it as a launch title. I just feel like it needed a little bit more in terms of its combat. It feels very much the same thing over and over and over. And while the open world design is kind of fun, I just felt myself sitting there waiting for something to happen. When those moments do happen, they are amazing and I have a great time with them, but it's everything else in between. I just didn't get into it. Characters are kind of dull and some of the voice acting is quite annoying at times, and I just couldn't get into the game as much as I hoped I would. I would really appreciate if you subscribed, and I'll see you in the next episode of JKB.